as you develop spiritually, you're going to gain in spiritual power. You might not care about spiritual power. You might not even want spiritual power. But as you develop spiritually, you're going to gain in spiritual power. It's part of what happens. So let's say a typical person might be like a 100-watt bulb. You have the capacity, this amazing body of yours has the capacity to be a 10,000-watt spiritual bulb. So how does this happen? How do you become a 10,000-watt spiritual bulb? The secret is tapas. Now, tapas is a Sanskrit word, and it means austerity, but more precisely, it means intense spiritual practice with a sense of sturdy self-discipline. And the reason you need sturdy self-discipline is because that tapas generates internal heat that burns away impurities in all the layers of your being, in your body, your subtle body, and so on. And so how does this create more spiritual power? Well, what happens is actually Patanjali, in the 4th chapter of the Yoga Sutras, in the 3rd verse, kind of gives the secret. He says, it's like a farmer breaking down the barriers to the irrigation of a field. So when you melt those impurities, that's like breaking down the barriers in your panchakosha. And then your essential nature flows in to fill your panchakosha, the 5 layers of your being. So what is that essential nature? Pure consciousness, bliss consciousness, the higher self. It's pure intelligence, but it's also Shakti. It's pure energy, pure potential energy. So that all flows in and fills the panchakosha, and you gain in spiritual power. That's what tapas does. Now, the most perfect tapas is samadhi. Samadhi means absorption in that pure awareness. Absolutely absorbed in it. It's like the state prior to the Big Bang, prior to the creation of the universe. A state of infinite potential energy. And so it's generating tremendous energy in the panchakosha. And the panchakosha is absorbing tremendous energy. So I want to put this in terms of an analogy. So imagine you have an electric stove and a burner, and you turn it on and you put a pot of water on the stove. So the burner is like pure consciousness. And that pot of water is your panchakosha. So the pot of water starts to absorb the heat and gets hotter and hotter. That's just like your panchakosha when your mind is in samadhi. So let's say the water heats up and heats up and heats up. Now it starts to boil. So what's happening there? The boiling is a dissipation of energy. So energy is going into that pot of water, but lots of boiling is happening and that energy is being dissipated. Like that, when you're doing tapas, that process of purification does involve a dissipation of your energy, of the energy that you're absorbing. So there's lots of purification, lots of thoughts, sometimes it's depicted as clouds of smoke pouring off of an ascetic who's doing severe tapas. You'll find that metaphor in the various scriptures. So there's that purification happening. But once the panchakosha is pretty purified, a very fascinating possibility arises that you can start to heat that water up to a temperature higher than the boiling point, and it won't boil. It will keep absorbing the energy. So that's like your panchakosha absorbing more and more of that chit shakti from the absolute, from pure consciousness, without dissipating it. So it absorbs it. And that's when you really start to become a 500-watt spiritual bulb, a 1,000-watt spiritual bulb, a 5,000-watt spiritual bulb. So that is the secret. And something also very interesting about this is that what is the panchakosha absorbing? It's absorbing the value of eternity, the value of immortality, the value of infinity. So that means anything becomes possible. The more your panchakosha absorbs the value of infinity, the more anything becomes possible. And that's how yogis develop siddhis. That's how some yogis develop a rainbow body or great longevity, because their whole system is absorbing that value of transcendental, immortal, pure consciousness. Now, another interesting thing. Is there a way we can accelerate this process? I wouldn't have asked if there wasn't. Yes, there is a way. Okay, so let's take that metaphor of the boiling water. If that water is at low atmospheric pressure, in other words, at a high altitude, it boils and dissipates energy at lower temperature. Like if you take a pot of water and heat it up at 10,000 feet altitude, then you're going to find it boils at a lower temperature than at sea level. If you take it below sea level, then that water absorbs more and more heat without boiling. So, yogis have discovered that a simple way to allow the panchakosha to absorb more and more of this value of immortality, spiritual power, without dissipating it, is to increase the pressure of prana, which means kumbhaka. Okay, kumbhaka means breath retention. Now, I'm not recommending that you do this at home. I'm just saying this as a piece of information. You should not do it at home. No, it requires expert guidance. And there's many levels of development of this whole gamut of absorbing pure consciousness, absorbing chit Shakti. Okay, so there's layer after layer of it. You can't find your way through it unless you're a very advanced yogi. So normally you need expert guidance. But it's interesting, that you can actually accelerate this absorption of eternity in your panchakosha, of infinite chit Shakti. But this is how you become a 10,000 watt spiritual bulb.